Wonderful. So we are now recording. So welcome everybody for coming on. I'm Reyna Franco. I'm a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer for Ogilvy. And if beyond this, if anybody's interested in my services, they're free to everybody in the Ogilvy office. And today we're going to talk about easy, healthy cooking hacks. So I'm going to start with my top 10 cooking tips. Some of you might already do, and some of you might not. Some of you've been thinking about. But my number one tip is hang a grocery list. I can't even talk straight. Hang a grocery list on your refrigerator and update it. So whenever you run out of something, you just write it down on the list. So I know for myself, whenever I'm cooking and I'm down to my last, I'll say red pepper, and I love red peppers. So I make sure make sure that's on the list. Or, if it's eggs or milk or, vegetables or, down to no bananas. So bananas are on my list. So constantly update that shopping list. So when you're ready to go to the supermarket, it's handy and you know exactly what you need. So does anybody do that already? You could feel like you could always unmute yourself, you could talk or not. But
I don't have it on my refrigerator, but I definitely put a list together most often before I go to the grocery store.
That's really important. Yeah, you want to make sure when you go to the supermarket, the grocery store, that you do have some kind of list and you're not working off a memory. Or because what happens then is sometimes you'll see something that is not on your list or you don't really need, but is enticing. And it might be one of those trigger foods that when you do bring it home, it's like a box of cookies is a good example. It looks really good in the supermarket, but doesn't look as good on your countertop. So yeah, having a grocery list is really key for grocery shopping. Um, the next one, and this also goes with the shopping list, is planning meals in advance. So this is an example on the screen of what a meal planner might look like. So you basically could say what your main dish is and what ingredients you need to make all those meals. Um, so this actually would be another really good uh, thing to post on your refrigerator. Post these that list the meals, what you need to create those meals, and any other miscellaneous foods like additional fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, things that you just need in your pantry. So meal planning is real important. Then you want to make sure you have your pantry stocked with a lot of different types of basic foods that you could easily pull out to make a meal. For example, lots of herbs and spices. And I'm going to talk about specifically what we could do with herbs and spices at the end of this session. But herbs and spices are great, especially if you are trying to go for low sodium, because we don't need salt. What we do need is we need things to make your food taste good without salt. And, my favorite is garlic and onion. That's the way I flavor my food. But there's so many different herbs and spices. And then another great thing to have are canned beans or dried beans and legumes. That's also right there. You have using a bean, that is a great source of protein. So you don't even need meat. So you just have the beans, that could be your protein. Another thing is vegetable broth. Sometimes I like using that when I make rice. You can use it for anything, but vegetable broth, is another easy thing you could purchase. They do sell vegetable broth made without salt, without sodium. And then dried whole grains and pastas and rice and oats. These are all items that will last a long time. And if you have all these items in your cupboard, it's pretty simple to just throw together a meal without really having to think too much about it. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about what they put into their pantry?
Is there a preference or different benefits of canned versus dried beans? There are times I like to try dried, but I feel like I don't rehydrate them correctly. Garbanzo
Yeah,
beans come to mind with that. I guess tips or thoughts on that.
right. The benefit of the dried is you don't have the risk of the BPA that you might have in the cans. Some of the cans are BPA free, so look for that if you're buying canned goods. Um, Also, I think it personally tastes better when you use the dried beans and soak them. So generally with the soaking, I go look online to see what the recommended soaking time is for a specific bean. And I just follow those instructions. And it usually works as long as you follow the instructions. Um, but the other advantage of having canned, and I certainly have canned beans also in the house, is that it's so simple. So I just, I buy no sodium, organic canned beans. And when I want to use them, I also drain them and rinse them to get whatever is on the outside of them off. And they're fine. Any other questions? Great. So number 4, going to, like planning your meals in advance, also prep in advance. So over the weekend, maybe you want to, make your grains, make the rice, make the pasta, put that in the refrigerator, chop up vegetables, soak your beans. So there are just a lot of things you could do in advance and then have it all ready for the week. So does anybody do anything like that on the weekends?
I used to.
You do? Time to start.
Doesn't happen as intended as much during shelter in place and working from home.
Yeah, yeah. I find that people are either doing it more or doing it less. I know for me, I'm doing it more because I'm doing a lot more cooking than prior to this. So I'm doing a lot more prep work. So it just makes the cooking at night goes so much faster when you could just, prep over the weekend or whenever you have a period of time that, you could just like just spend chopping and dicing. And, for me, I love the taste of onions, but I hate chopping them up. So I could chop up a whole bunch of onions and then just put them in individual containers. It makes me a lot happier when I have to cook. And again, doing batch cooking for multiple days and dishes. So that's something else we could do to make our life easier. So again, on the weekend, if you're doing your prep work, you could also do some batch cooking. So if you're only one person in the house, so what you want to do there, this is actually a great for when you're just one person because quite often a recipe is 4 servings. So you do the recipe for 4 servings and you have 4 meals. So what I would often do is I would take 2 of those meals, have 2 of the meals during the week, and the other 2 I put in the freezer. And so then I could just, take them out of the freezer and defrost it, the following week or 2 weeks later. So, for when you're the one person in the house, it's great. And when you are a family, it's also nice too, because if you make a lot of different dishes at once, you know, make your life during the week so much easier when you have to, you know, you have kids, you're doing the schooling, you have to, make sure that they're going to sleep on time, they're waking up and the whole 9 yards. Um, so batch cooking is really a great task that's going to make your day, make your week so much easier. And, I talked about prepping the food, also storing them in the freezer. So I talked about my onions and you know, don't, prepping onions is so stinky and smelly. So I also can do that. So I could, cut up my onions and then freeze some of that for another day. Um, you could do ice cube trays. So like garlic is really good to put into a little ice cube. And you would have like individual like garlic cloves already pressed out, and you could use that. I know they sell that too. I've seen that in the stores where Trader Joe's has individual they have garlic basil and ginger. But you could do that yourself too, and just put it in your own ice cube trays. Freezing soups and sauces is really nice because we quite often when you make a soup or a stew or a sauce, you make a lot of it, and you know, it's often too much for, for one person. But if you freeze some of it in batches, you just, when you want to eat it, just take it out and you defrost it and you have it for that day or the next day. So freezing, using your freezer as much as you can is great. Of course, depending upon the size of your freezer, there's only so much you could put in there. But it's, I think city freezers are smaller than uh, if you live in a house. But do the best you can to freeze. Make sure you date things. You put what the ingredients are on the label too, so you know what it is. Generally, again, I go online to see how long you can keep something frozen. Food in the freezer doesn't go bad to make you sick. What could happen if you freeze it for too long? The consistency of the food might change and the color might change. But if you eat it, you're not going to get sick. Any questions about freezing? All right. Another thing that I really like to have handy are glass stackable containers. So again, you could freeze them, you could refrigerate them, you could cook in them, you could, if you use a microwave, you could microwave in them. You could even eat out of them. So they're very useful. Again, they're great for storage. You could put your prep food in there. When you are done with the meal, you could store, whatever leftovers you have in there. So it's safe. That's another thing. It's not like aluminum, anything glass is very safe. Um, Plastic, not too sure about. Uh, Aluminum foil, not too sure about, but glass is very safe. Okay, use sharp knives. This is really very important. Number one, it cuts better. So it's going to make your chopping and dicing so much easier. It's really worth purchasing a high quality knife. All you need is one really good knife. And make sure you keep it clean. Don't put it in the dishwasher. Um, you might need to get it sharpened every now and then. You might need to, if you know how to do that, it's great. If not, you could take it to somebody who sharpens knives. The other thing, it's safer. And the reason why a sharp knife is safer than a dull knife is that number one, it cuts and it cuts cleanly, and you don't usually slide off the food. And if you accidentally cut yourself, you'll also get a clean cut. You won't mangle your skin with a dull knife. So, it's something to keep in mind. It's, like I said, it's worth having a nice sharp knife. And there are a lot of different types of knives out there for what you like to cook primarily, and the size of your hand, the weight of knives. So do a little research. If you want to invest in a good knife, research what would be right for your style of cooking, and how you want to hold that knife. You'll be surprised what you'll learn when you do a little bit of knife research. Mise en place. Who knows what that means? It's a French term. Well, it's a style of preparation. And it's French. It means everything in its place. So what you do when you're cooking and you're prepping, do all your prep work in advance: the cutting, the dicing, the chopping, the measuring. Have everything in place before you actually start cooking. And it's great. It makes everything flow, the whole cooking process flow more easily. So you look at your recipe and you can follow your recipe easily without having to chop and dice in the middle of a recipe. And you'll find that your food is going to actually taste better by doing this, because it, again, allows you to do the cooking in a timely manner. So another great little tip for cooking. And so you can try. Oh, bye, Michael. All right. And We want to make cleanup easy because I don't know about you, but that's sometimes the worst part about cooking um, is the cleaning. So number one, to make it easier, if you have any cooking pans, line it with parchment paper or tin foil so that the pans will stay cleaner and they'll be easier to clean afterwards. And the other thing, kind of like this in place, clean the dishes as you go. So, when you dirty something, don't just throw it in the sink like you see here in this picture. Put it aside quickly clean it and then put it to the side or put it in the dishwasher. It's so nice to have a clean kitchen while you're cooking. It's less chaotic. You have a better feeling when you're cooking when there's less chaos in the kitchen. So any questions about anything we talked about? Any comments before we move on to herbs and spices? All right. So I talked about herbs and spices flavor our food. Um, so it's really interesting about how we handle herbs and spices. I have a lot of dried spices, but herbs and spices we could also grow in an apartment. They don't need a lot of space to grow. You just could put it in the windowsill. Um, and I'm going to really quickly go through these tips because I'll let you read them on your own. I'll be setting out the slides. But number one, you can store herbs in a plastic bag. So storage is really important. But what's so interesting, what you want to do is you want to, number one, make sure everything is dry. Make sure those herbs are dry when you put them in the bag. And then you your blow air into the bag and tie it up. And then what this will do is it's going to keep the herbs fresh. So that's it. Really simple, easy way to make sure your herbs are fresh. And what you have to do is when you're done, when you want to use it, then you wash your herbs because you did use your breath to in the bag, so it has whatever pathogens your breath might have. So you definitely have to wash the herbs afterwards. And washing herbs just means you're rinsing them off in cold water. You want to make sure you store your herbs properly, so you don't want to put them in the back of the refrigerator where it's really cold. It's quite often I put them on the side door where it's less cold. Um, Another way to store them is to put the stems, the bottom of the herbs, in water. So just another way, instead of using them in the bag, just putting some, I usually take a paper towel and wrap them in a little damp water. So that keeps the herbs fresh. If you have a lot of herbs, like basil is great to make pesto. You can just make some delicious pesto. That's a great way to use the herbs, and it's amazing how many basil leaves pesto needs to make a small amount. It's I had a huge basil plant this summer and made lots of pesto, but didn't make as much as I thought I would. Another thing you could do with these fresh tender herbs, I was specifically talking about basil, cilantro, mint, parsley, dill, and tarragon, is you could put them into smoothies. I love mint. So mint is one of my favorite herbs for using in a smoothie, or I love making in tea. Does anybody use any of these herbs in a specific way that they like to share?
I keep on forgetting to put mint in smoothies.
Yeah, yeah, it gives it such a nice kick. And I like using parsley in a lot of the dishes I make. If I'm doing something Italian, just like throw parsley in it. And then we have more robust herbs like lavender, oregano, thyme, rosemary, sage, and bay leaf. And if you're having them fresh, you want to make sure you wash and dry them and you remove any yellow or brown leaves. So these you could actually put in the ice cube, make in ice cubes. So I was talking about the onion and garlic, you could do that too, but it's really nice to have the frozen fresh herbs. Um, You could dry them upside down. You know, it's always so pretty. If you have a nice big kitchen, you could do that. You could use a microwave to dry them out. So there's a lot of ways to dry out our herbs. And you could, just last one, grow and snip. So again, we could just easily grow them in, you know, in a little apartment, in a kitchen window. So, and when you're ready to use them, just, cut it, and it'll keep on growing and you'll keep getting fresh leaves. So growing herbs is really nice. It looks pretty. And it's wonderful to be able to have that available anytime. And then, of course, dried herbs. Um, this is also a wonderful way to just quickly, you know, spice up our food. And quite often, the correlation to dried to fresh is 1 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon of herbs. Another thing you do to make your dry herbs more flavorful is squeeze them, crumble them, because it will release the flavors. Cook them, and quite often they do lose their potency. So over time, some of them, like some of the herbs that you buy, will have a use by date, which would be great. What I always suggest doing, if it doesn't, put the date that you opened up the herb um, container in. So label it that you opened up on October 1st of 2020. So in about 6 months, you probably will need to use more if you want to use that particular herb because the taste degenerates. It doesn't necessarily go bad. You might want to toss it out after a couple of years, but they don't usually go bad. Any comments about herbs and spices? All right. So lastly, I just want to talk about healthy cooking modifications. So here's a link, and oops, sorry. I was hoping I could get into it. So I'm going to, I'm going to leave the screen and we'll go into this link. All right. So everybody's going to get the slides, but this is a great PDF, great fact sheet that tells you how you could make recipes healthier. So, for example, the first group is, hi.
We're still seeing your PowerPoint.
Oh, you are? Okay, interesting. Thank you for telling me. Okay, let's go to stop share, and I'm going to go back to that. There it goes. All right, now you must see it. So you see it now?
Yes, thanks.
Great. Thank you for telling me. So the first section is tips on how to decrease fat and lower calories in recipes. So for example, if the recipe calls for shortening butter, margarine, or solid fat, it recommends using a quarter less of liquid oil or solid fat. Or if it's, for example, 1 cup, use 3/4 of a cup. And it goes on with all different products. So like if it calls for whole fat cheese, use reduced fat cheese. Or use part skim mozzarella. If you use eggs, use egg whites. So there are a lot of great options or great ideas here of how to make a recipe healthier. Then it talks about how to reduce sodium, tips on how to reduce sugar in recipes. So if you're doing any baking, this might be very helpful on different ways you could reduce your sugar in baking. And then ways to increase fiber. So for example, if you're, again, baking, instead of, if it calls for a flour, use maybe whole wheat flour, and you could actually do half and half if it calls for white flour. So I do that. I've been making, I have a recipe for sourdough bread, and it's uses white flour, and so I've been doing 50% whole wheat, 50% regular, and it's coming out delicious. So just different ideas of ways to improve your health when you're cooking. So that's that. Any questions about anything we talked about?
I don't have any questions. I just think that the freezing sauces and soups is a really good reminder.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I know I have to keep reminding myself to freeze things because I'm always excited when I haven't prepared anything to eat and then I could go into my freezer and I see, oh, I made this vegetarian chili and it would be a perfect meal.
Oh, completely. And I've found that reheating things with like on the stove or in the oven, it definitely tastes better than in the microwave.
Yes, it really
Even though the
does.
microwave is so fast.
Yeah, it's so true. That's a really good point. Definitely. Anybody else have any other good tips for cooking?
None for me. Thank you, though.
You're welcome, Dane. Good to see you. Good to see your name. All right. Well, thank you for coming. You know where to find me if you have any questions. And I don't have anything yet planned for October. I'm going to try coming up with some new interesting ideas. If you have any suggestions of what any type of presentations you'd like to see, just send them to me. Tell me. I'm really open to hearing what you'd like to learn about. All right. So everybody have a great day.
Great. Thank you.
And hope to see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Reyna.